Hey guys, RJ here, and I know that this week's episode of The Expanse might have not been absolutely everything that we wanted. This is definitely still a little bit of a filler episode, but I don't want to write it off because I think there's a lot of good things that are brought up in this episode and a lot of good things kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen moving forward. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. As always, guys, if you have not seen the current episode of The Expanse, Season 2, Episode 10, please turn this review off, go watch the rest of it on Sci-Fi, come back here, and then we can talk about it. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's just dive into this head first. I thought overall that this episode is definitely a status quo filler episode. I don't mean that in a negative way, particularly. I just think that the pacing for these filler episodes has been maybe just like a smidgen off. I don't think it's been bad, and I'm not going to say that it's bad because these are still great episodes of television when you compare them to what is out there, okay? Anybody go watch CBS on a daily basis and let me know how you feel afterwards. But also to say that it's not filler would be kind of a lie. I know that there are a lot of plot points that they are moving along here, but in general, there's just not a ton of action. It's a lot of story sets, and I'm really okay with that. They foreshadowed a lot of things in this episode, and I think we have to talk about what I would consider the main character of this episode, and that is Bobbie Draper. So yeah, last week they ended up rushing Bobbie out of that courtroom as fast as they could because she ended up pretty much giving away kind of what happened on Ganymede, saying there's a guy without a vac suit. This piques Christian's interest, and she ends up trying in this episode to see Bobbie again. She even brings up, and it's like the most cringeworthy moment. She's like, so I guess we won't be hearing anymore from Bobbie or Lieutenant Draper for a while for, reasons because she's probably unable to speak. And their defense secretary does a great, like, hey, your fleet's still flying to Ganymede. Like, you still want to have a fight or you want to get down to business? I did like that. But I think Bobbie's story is so integral overall to what is happening right now that it still takes away from the show saying, like, this is the main character of this episode. And I do like it when Bobbie is that because she's a really good catalyst. I think she's a decent actor. Frankie Adams. I just, in general, I mean, her storyline wasn't overly interesting, but we get to see her kind of walk through. She escapes from the Martian facility. And I gotta say, MVP of the week has to go to her fall because she's even warned about like finding the horizon and stuff by the douchebag captain that yelled at her earlier. But pretty much she finally, after hours of twiddling at the window, she ends up using her medal that she got from the Ganymede battle, and she cuts out of the window and then she gets out and she's like, yeah, I'm fine. And then she just absolutely eats shit on the pavement. That gets MVP of the week for me this week. I know that it's a funny one, but I lost it. Funny moments aside, Bobbie gets a lot of new information this episode. And it's not just from the Christian stuff where Christian tells her, like, it's actually your government that is the one that's doing this test on Ganymede. You were pretty much, a lab rat. I mean, they pretty much put you out there. They're lying about this whole thing. And she's like, I wish it was my government. She's like, I could at least control it. I would know more about it. But she openly states, like, it's your government and I'm going to need you, Bobbie Draper. I'm going to need you to help me figure out who this is, what they're doing, why they're doing it. And I'm like, you're like kind of my last hope at this point. We don't have anyone else on the inside. You've got to be the one. Obviously, Bobbie fights back on this, saying, like, you're the enemy. Like, I can't trust you. And I know it's got to be hard for Bobbie to believe someone like Christian, who is so deeply embowed in the bureaucracy that is Earth. But, I mean, you got to realize, like, she's risking her own position right now, meeting you on the shore, which I love the metaphor that is the ocean because, Bobbie in this episode is clearly starting to see, like, both sides of the argument for Earth and Mars. She's clearly conflicted still. But at the same time, I think the metaphor for her going to the ocean is her kind of also seeing how wide the world really is, how many different types of people there really are. And maybe they don't have, such a vast, like, majority up on Mars because so many of them are dedicated to the task of terraforming. But I think it really opened her eyes when she meets what I would consider the best supporting cast character I've seen on this show so far. The doctor that's still waiting for his employment turn. I thought that whole scene was amazing where he ends up teaching her to, like, slowly lift her head to find the horizon, and he ends up trading for stuff because he's trying to help local kids in a local shelter and stuff. And I just thought the whole scene with him in it was a great supporting character. And I think it's kind of showed us a little bit more of Bobbie, kind of see like both, and she's seeing both sides of the argument. She even heard from Christian, like not one day ago or earlier in the day. I'm not really sure on the timeline for that, but pretty much she had just heard from Christian saying, you know, like there are tons of people on Earth that are jobless, and it's not because they don't want to work. It's not because they're lazy. They're not takers like a lot of, and not to say that there aren't any, but the majority of them want to work. And this is a perfect example. You know, like someone explained it to her, and then she gets a real life example like a few minutes later. And I think that's kind of helped cement the idea in Bobbie's brain that not all Earthers are bad. They might not just be the enemy. And you can see her fighting that at the end of her conversation with Christian when she's like denying that, no, there's no way it's Mars. There's no way they would kill my squad, my team. There's no way that they would do that. I think Christian's probably right on the money here, though, because Jules Pierre Mao did say, like, I got other buyers. Like, it's not just you. So if you don't want to mess around with my shindig, I'm going to move on. And it seems like he either one, already had this planned, or two, got immediate feedback that they want the proto-molecule as a weapon. Honestly, now that I think about it, this might be the first episode, at least in my opinion, and that doesn't mean you have to agree. Let me know down below if you agree. I think this is the first episode in which I am more interested in the stuff happening on Earth than I am the stuff happening in space. Because while we get these really cool shots, which I'll talk about the Alex stuff in a minute, because that stuff was amazing, but we get these really cool cinematography shots. There's a lot of cool lighting styles going on up at Ganymede Station, but it's literally just like Holden, Naomi, Amos, and Prax just walking through Ganymede. I mean, they learn a few things along the way, like, yep, follow the yellow brick road full of dying plants, and it's not that it's not important. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying, as a viewer, I felt more interested in the stuff happening on Earth because of the script writing for that and just the way that they were moving that plot forward. The Ganymede stuff felt very like Station A, Station B, Station C. And I'd like to see them kind of mix up that formula a little bit when they are on, like, 'cause they kind of did the same thing with Eros. And I know that it's hard because they're out in space. There's limited space out in space, which is funny to say, but I do understand like their limitations, especially budget wise. You know, they have to have episodes like this. But I just want to say in the future, I would like to see them kind of mix up the recipe a little bit, maybe split everyone out and then have them all come back together. But pretty much, let's talk about what happens on Ganymede. Prax comes in, he talks like a million times about plants. It's clearly his security blanket of some sort. I mean, he always, like, whenever this conversation gets serious and he can't deal with anything, he starts like talking about plants. So he's a biologist through and through. I still don't believe that he's actually going to join the Rosinante crew. It even has guest starring on the opening credits, so I don't know if he's just a character that we're following along, kind of like the Joe Miller. But yeah, so Prax ends up, they get into the station, they're looking around, they end up finding this guy who loves frickin' chicken. Amos beats the absolute shit out of him with said chicken can. I thought that was amazing. Amos once again just losing his freaking mind. And I think this episode we get what might be even the most character depth so far for Amos, where we start learning where he says, I grew up in an area with bullies. You know what bullies did in that area? And then he talks for like 5 minutes about a prostitution ring. Pretty much he's like, you know, they take little girls, they put them out on the streets to get screwed, and then they get pregnant and they find other guys that like that too. And so yeah, whatever happened with him in Baltimore, I think it's got to be coming up pretty soon. They keep hinting at all of these things that, you know, are kind of linking him to his past, and I think eventually they're just going to have to show us exactly what he went through to end up the way that he is today, and maybe that's why he's kind of dead inside, or maybe he was one of the pimps. Maybe he ended up peddling women and girls and stuff, and that's why he's so angry all the time, or maybe it was someone he loved that got peddled, maybe a sister or a really close friend or a love interest or something like that. I could see that as well, but it does start to give us a background as to why Amos is the way he is, why he at times appears emotionally pretty much helpless. He doesn't understand why people are looking at him weird. I think this definitely provides a great background amount of knowledge for Amos as a character. So I forgot to mention this earlier with the Earth stuff, but Aaron Wright finally comes out, admits to Christian what he's done. He puts everything on the table, and in a very emotional scene, I really like the way that they play this out, where she even asks him, like, you don't look or seem okay. Like, are you doing all right? And he just sits down like a really heavy sit, and he pretty much just throws it all out, both figuratively and literally, onto the table. Like, I was working with Jules Pierre Mao. I thought it was going to be for peace. I thought it was going to be protect Earth. And, you know, you always taught me that that's what should come first, Earth's protection. And I probably got ahead of myself here, and things have gotten out of control. Eros this was my fault. That had everything to do with this proto-molecule. Here's all the information I have on it. There's probably a lot more, and we're gonna have to work together in order to keep the system from falling down, I think is the line he uses, or falling apart. And I mean, eventually, Kirsten brings up, like, eventually you're gonna have to face the music. You pretty much almost destroyed the entire planet because you were looking for peace. And yeah, I mean, he has to have accountability at the end of the day. That being said, I do think he could end up being a really good redemption character. I like him as an actor. I think he's great. I liked him in Frontier. Overall, I think he's done a pretty solid job at the lines he's been given. I'd like to see him, like, come back and redeem himself as a character in the show. He really does, at least usually, seem to have Earth as his strong point. Like, he's really just doing this all to defend Earth, but like so many of us do, you can get caught up in that and end up doing things and have consequences that you did not expect. Let's talk about the best scene, at least in my opinion, of the episode, and that's Alex. Alex floating around up in space, just dicking around on the Rosinante, sitting there blaring like old-fashioned country music. I love this scene. I love that they included this in this episode. They needed something to maybe pad time a little bit here. Absolutely love this scene. Him just having fun out in space. That's exactly what I would do. If I was sitting there, I had to waste however long he's going to have to waste sitting there in a chair. I'm going to get up and I'm going to have some fun in zero G. So, yeah, I absolutely love this scene. He throws the can down the stairwell. He even takes his gun to see how far it is. And yeah, I absolutely love this. He clicks his mag boots together. It was all perfect. Thank you, The Expanse, for once again hitting a part of me in a TV show that I didn't know I'd ever enjoy this much. But yeah, that was that whole scene with him, and then we end up learning at the end of it that there's a no-fly rule now implemented over Ganymede, and this kind of goes into what my theory is for what might be happening in the next week. I have not seen the preview yet for that episode, but I really think the way that Prax is hinting that Ganymede is already dead. I mean, he says that in this episode, that Ganymede is pretty much already dead. They just don't really know it yet. He clearly knows biology better than most. But he does bring up, that there's a bacteria that is in the lines, and it helps defeat these other bacteria that prevent nitrogen buildup in the plants or something along those lines. I'm sure you guys will correct me. But he says something that the bacteria fighters aren't there. And I'm really curious if that's just because the domes, all the destruction that happened, or is that intentional? Are the plants supposed to die and then the proto-molecule gets pumped in? Or the proto-molecule has to show up, right? We end up learning at the end of this that it's in this part of the base that was the original part of the base, and nobody has cameras in there, which I think is freaking ridiculous. I don't care what part of a station is at. If it's on an outer planet in our solar system, there should probably be a camera. That we have cameras at my job in the most ridiculous places. There should absolutely be a camera on every part of this moon base. I find that ridiculous, great plot hole there. But yeah, so there's no cameras in there, and I'm sure we'll find out why next week. But pretty much holding in them, they see May, they see the doctor, they see everybody, and they're like, well, I guess that's where we're gonna go. So we're gonna find out next episode, I'd assume pretty quickly, what is actually taking place in the original part of the base. I think that alone would be really weird for me. If I was a character living on this station and never go to see the original part of the base, I feel like there's only so many places you could go on this moon. So I do find that all just a little bit out of place. With all that being said, though, guys, I thought that this episode had a lot of filler. But I was okay with it. There were parts of it that I really enjoyed, like the Alex scene. That made the whole episode for me. I can't call this one a bad scene or a bad episode. I thought it was still really solid. The CGI was still amazing. I absolutely loved the shots with planets on it. And you get to get these super pulled back shots where you get to see two planets right next to each other. I just absolutely love that stuff. They're doing a great job visually. I think the lighting in the Christian scenes, I've talked about that before, but I love the lighting in those scenes. I think they're terrific. I think maybe it was a little bit weaker cinematography-wise up on Ganymede Station. I felt like a few different times the lighting didn't look exactly right, but maybe that's implied and it's supposed to be because it's a wreck. But I did think it looked a little weird at times. But in general, the audio for this show is terrific. The song that Alex is listening to, the build up when they're searching on Earth for Bobbie Draper. I just, everything in general, still very clean, still overall really, really well done. I can't complain. And this is a sci-fi show, guys. Let us not forget, this is a sci-fi show. Well, guys, that's pretty much it for me. I thought this was a pretty decent episode of The Expanse. I didn't think it was spectacular in really any fashion, but I think a few different scenes really saved it from being a below average episode. In general, I love doing these reviews. I love looking forward every Wednesday to The Expanse on Sci-Fi, so I'm really excited to see where they take the show moving forward. I think right now we're at a low point. I think we're going to start building back up that hill and hitting the climax at the end of the season. I think the Venus stuff is definitely going to be involved, so let me know your theories down below. Book readers, please don't spoil anything for us. I really don't have to block anyone, but let me know your theories down below. What do you guys think they're going to take on next? Where do you think this is headed? Subscribe to us here on YouTube. That helps us out the most. We have a PayPal link now for donations, and we have a bunch of social media links down in the video description for you. Follow us there and start another conversation in one of those groups. And until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.